Wozomatrix and welcome to Wozomatrix. My name is Luni and I'll be assisting you to get all of your questions through to us. Today we are assisting with the exam guide for Economics Paper 2. All you need to do to get your questions and comments through to us is hit us up on our social media platforms, search for Wozomatrix, as well as our WhatsApp line. The details will be on the screen. Don't forget guys, we've got a cool competition going on, so to get all of those details, do stay tuned. Like always, I'm not alone. With me are my favorite sign language interpreter, Nicolene, as well as our awesome teacher, Tando. Thank you so much guys, and over to you.
Thanks, Luni. Welcome, boys and girls, to another segment where I'm going to be assisting you guys on how to tackle Paper 2. I'm going to be taking you and helping you guys on how to attempt your Paper 2. Paper 2, just like Paper 1, is a 2-hour paper, 150 marks, and it's got the following topics or the following modules. We've got our microeconomics, and then we've got our contemporary economic issues. Right. Microeconomics has got the following topics. We have our perfect markets, we have our imperfect markets, then we've got market failures. And then our contemporary economic issues, we tackle inflation, we look at tourism, and then we also look at environmental sustainability. So these are the topics that you guys can expect in your paper 2. As usual, our economics paper is divided into 3 sections. We've got our section A, which is our question 1. We have got our section B. Section B, boys and girls, has got 3 questions. You are required to attempt 2 of those 3 questions. So you've got question 2 to question 4. Then we've got our section C. Section C has got question 5 and also question 6. Right, let's now go look at section A. Section A has got our question 1, which is the first question in our examination question paper. Question 1 is a compulsory question, and all topics are examinable, right? And it's a 30-mark question. You need to take a maximum of 20 minutes in this section. Right, the type of questions that you can expect in your section A, in your question 1, we have got for 1.1, we've got our multiple choice questions. Like I've already said in paper 1, your multiple choice questions, it's question 1.11 right through to question 1.18. You are given 4 options there. You've got option A, option B, option C, and also option B. You are encouraged to choose 1 option per question. So if your answer for 1.1 is A, you only choose A. Don't write A or B, or write B or C there. Just choose 1 option there. And then we've got our question 1.2, which is the matching column, where you are given 2 columns, column A and also column B. Column A is the concept, and then column B is the description to the column. So you are supposed to match the term with the description or the befitting description in column B there. Then you've got your question number 1.3, which is your description of terms there. This should be 1.3. It's your description of terms there, right? This is a give a term. Normally, it is the question where you are given a term, you are given a statement, and then you are supposed to give a term that answers that statement there. As I've already said to you guys, in this section, please do not use abbreviations. Write words in full there. For example, they would say the nature of a product in a monopoly. Please write the term. If the word is unique, write unique there. Don't write abbreviations or acronyms for this section. Right, we are moving on to section B. Section B of the question paper, this one we have got 3 questions. We've got our question 2, our question 3, and our question 4. You are required to answer only 2 questions in this section. You can choose a combination of whatever questions you want to choose there, depending on how strong you are in that particular module. I would advise you learners to use your 8-mark questions for the choice of question that you want to answer. Look at your question 2.4, 2.5, question 3.4, 3.5, question 4.4 and 4.5. Those carry with them 16 marks in the exam. So if you get those correct, then you might as well, or you are already on your way to passing that particular question. So look at those questions, to assist you in choosing which question you want to tackle in section B, right? Your question 2 is your microeconomics. So you are looking at questions around your markets, your market failure. And then your contemporary economic issues, these are asked in question 3. Your inflation, your tourism, and your environmental sustainability, these are the topics that are asked there. And then your question 4 is a combination of microeconomics and your contemporary economic issues. So here you are asked a combination of all the 2 modules that we tackle in paper 2. As we continue with our section B, like I've already said to you, boys and girls, there are 2 questions that you have to answer there out of the 3 that are given. Please note, the marker is not allowed to choose a question for you. If you answer all 3 questions, the first 2 questions are the ones that are going to be marked. The last one is going to be scratched out. So don't write all 3 questions and leave it to the marker, just in case you did better in your question 2 and your question 4, and you didn't do equally well in your question 3. So you need to be able to make the choice for yourself, because only the first 2 questions are going to be answered there. These are typically your short questions in section B. They carry with them 40 marks. You need to allocate a maximum of 30 minutes there. Remember, boys and girls, you need to time yourself so that you are able to finish the exam. Time is also tested in the exam. Not finishing is not passing the exam. Right? And then we have our section C. Section C, we have our 2 questions. You have to attempt any one of the 2 questions. Question 5 is your microeconomics. And then question 6, we have got our contemporary economic issues. I'm going to just encourage you, boys and girls, you know which module you are strong in, right? You need to make sure that you are able to identify a module that you are strong in, reinforce and do as many past exam papers as you can in that particular module, so that you are able, if let's say you are strong in microeconomics, which is your question 2 and part of question 4, then you are also able to ideally answer question 5 in the essay, right? And then if you are strong in your contemporary economic issues, you are going to be able to answer question 3 and question 4, and ideally question 6 when it comes to the essays in your section C. You need to select one of the 2 essays, and then 40 marks, you allocate again 30 questions there. That's it from this section. I'm going to cross over to Luni to take us to the ad break.
Thank you, Tando. Guys, we are going to take a quick break, but don't go anywhere. We'll see you straight after this. Welcome back from the break, Matrix. If you've just joined us, we are doing your exam guide to help you prep for the upcoming exams. If you're someone who's constantly running out of data, then this next competition is just for you. Waza Matrix is bringing you the hashtag WazoWinner competition, where 2 lucky matriculants stand a chance to win 2 gigs of data. All you need to do to enter is head on over to our Facebook page, and all of the details will be there. Thank you so much, Tando. Over to you.
Thank you, Luni. Welcome back, boys and girls. We're still continuing with our exam guide to paper 2. Now we are going to move straight to section B, where we are going to look at the list or name type of questions, the what, the how, and the why type of questions. These are data response questions, and these questions should be answered in paragraphs. However, I need to allude to you, boys and girls, to say, even if it's a paragraph type of questions, you still need to write in point form, right? As it's difficult sometimes for markers to identify your solution or your answers if the paragraph is cluttered. So remember, always, always, always write in point form. Again, I need to also emphasize the point that abbreviations and acronyms are permitted in section B. It's only in section A where you cannot use paragraphs. Right? Your question 2.11 or your question 3.1, your question 4.1, these are the list or name type of questions. These are lower cognitive level, and they normally carry a maximum of 2 marks. There is no explanation that is required there. So when you are asked in the exam to name a particular thing, you need to just name that particular thing. Do not go down and explain, as you earn no marks for explanation. For example, our 2.11 says, name any 2 causes of market failures. Name any 2 causes of market failures. Let's look at the solution. The solution says, number 1, you've got externalities. Number 2, you've got missing markets. You also have others like imperfect competition, lack of knowledge, immobility of factors of production, imperfect distribution of income. Like I said, you only need to name only 2 to get the 2 marks. Please do not write more than, as if you write more than the 2 that is required, the marker is only going to mark the first 2 and leave out the rest. So you name only 2. Again, I need to emphasize, guys, as you are writing this type of question, make sure your stronger answers are at the top, because normally we focus on the top answers and we leave out the rest. Right? And then we continue, we look at the mid-cognitive level questions. These are the type of questions that ask how, what, and why. Right? These you need to be guided by the mark allocation. Right? Normally, if it's a 2-mark question, you only required to give out 1 point. However, in giving out the 1 point, you need to show that you understand the question and there is a link between what you were asked and what you are answering. Answer these type of questions in full sentences. For example, it can be a 4.12 type of question. It says, why is it important for the South African Reserve Bank to monitor and to control the supply of money, for 2 marks? Right, when it says 1 times 2, what it means is you need to give 1 point and that 1 point carries 2 marks. If you see a question written 2 times 1, what it means then is you need to give out 2 points and each point carries 1 mark in the exam. But if, for example, in this question it says 1 times 2, so you need to give out 1 point times 2 marks, you earn your 2 points there. Why is it important for the South African Reserve Bank to monitor and to control the supply of money? Right, let's look at the solution, boys and girls. Now, remember I said this should be answered in full sentences and you need to show the link to your solution. So here is the answer. The supply of money in circulation should be monitored to create a balance between money supply and the available goods and services in the economy. Otherwise, increased inflation would be as a result. Remember, boys and girls, when we've got too much money chasing too few goods, that results in inflation. So we need to ensure that the amount of money that is in circulation can match the available goods in the economy. Right. Let's look at the data response questions. These are your mid-cognitive level. We are looking at our question 2.2, our question 2.3, our question 3.2, 3.3, 4.2, and 4.3. These ones are given in the form of a paragraph, in the form of a cartoon, a table, an extract, real data, or a combination of an extract and a graph, or a combination of an extract and a cartoon and a table. Right? Normally, data response questions, they carry a maximum of 10 marks. So it's going to be your 2.21, 2.22, 2.23, right up until 2.25. Right. Examples of data response questions, ideally from a cartoon. You are given a cartoon, so they say study the cartoon below and answer the questions that follow. Let's look at the cartoon. There is our cartoon there. It says artificial versus a natural monopoly. Then we have got that guy there who is our monopoly, and they say, I don't have to worry, I've got a patent. I will always make an economic profit. And then there is another guy there next to him who says, I would love to form part of this market, but it seems impossible. Now, how do we tackle such questions? Let's look at the type of questions we can get from the cartoon. Right. Normally, when you get a data response question, right, the first 2 questions are usually easy. They are lower cognitive level question. And again, like I said, when we discussed our paper 1, there is going to be scaffolding there. The level of difficulty is going to increase as the questions go down, right? And normally our first 2 questions, they get a mark allocation of 1 each. These are our list, name, identify type of questions, right? There is our cartoon again. Let's look for an example. This is an example of a question. It says, identify the type of monopoly that is depicted in that cartoon there. Right, if we go back to the cartoon, what do we notice? The guy is saying, I don't have to worry. I've got a patent. I'll always make economic profit. Right, so what it means, boys and girls, is because the nature of the barrier to entry there, it is non-economic in nature. It's a patent, so it gives rise to an artificial monopoly. There is our solution there. It's our artificial monopoly there. That's your answer. Right? Then as we continue, now we look at the middle order cognitive questions. These are items in the data response questions. They range from easy to difficult. Again, there is scaffolding there. Right? The next two questions are moderate and each is allocated 2 marks. For example, you have to look at questions that ask you to briefly describe the term, what does this mean, what is, etc., etc. Let's look at the question again, or the cartoon again. Right, let's look at an example of a question. Describe the nature of a product produced by a monopoly. Right, when you are attempting this question, you are not necessarily going to get the answer from the extract or from the cartoon or from whatever data response or data form you are given. These are questions that require you as a learner to recall. So you might need to recall them. What type of product does a monopoly produce? Right, let's look at the answer. The product in a monopoly is unique as it does not have clause substitute. I'll repeat again, boys and girls, full sentence, and your answer should be a full sentence there. Don't just write unique, because it's a moderate type of question. Let's continue. Right, as we're continuing again with our data response, now we are looking at easy to difficult. The last question is a more difficult and is allocated 4 marks. These ones might require you to calculate. They might require you to evaluate. For example, you are asked how effective. You might be required to propose a solution. How is, etc., etc. Let me just speak to calculate kind of questions. These are questions that require you in the exam to calculate something. For example, you are asked to calculate the type of profit that a monopoly is making. Please, learners, always show working. It is important. Don't just punch the numbers in your calculator and then you just write the solution there. If a question carries 4 marks, the maximum you get for just writing the answer, you are just going to get 2. So you need to show your working clearly. Again, guys, why do you need to show the working? Just in case you punch something wrong and your answer comes out wrong. But if there is working there, the marker is able to follow through your solution and be able to pick. You might get 2 points there and lose out the 2 points for just getting the answer wrong, but your working is correct. So always show your working for calculate type of questions there. Right. For example, let's look at a question that carries 4 marks. It says, how can tourism alleviate poverty in rural areas? How can poverty alleviate poverty in rural areas? It's a how question. So what you are required to do as a learner there, you are required to show the link between tourism and alleviation of poverty in rural areas. 4 marks, 2 by 2, which carries 4 marks there. So a minimum of 2 points is required for that question. Let's look at the solution. Tourism can alleviate poverty by empowering poor people to exploit opportunities of on-the-job and other types of training there. So it's empowering poor people to exploit opportunities for on-the-job and other trainings there. Number 2, hiring rural people who work directly in the sector as tour operators, as travel agents, and also as flight attendants there. Again, you can also talk about providing income to rural people through spending by tourists on goods and services in the area there. Remember what I said, it's a 4-mark question, so you need to give a maximum of 2 points for that question. I will emphasize again, you get no marks for over answering or over attempting a question. Even if you know 10 points, you are not going to get 10 marks for stating 10 points. Stick to the 2 that are required in this particular question. Right. Again, you can talk about rural people can benefit from infrastructure built for tourists. Again, you can say acquiring skills needed in the tourism industry, for example, becoming tour guides, hotel staff, and other things. Also, tourism offers opportunities for the poor, allowing them a stake in to start and operate small-scale tourist-based businesses or tourism-based businesses there. Right. Now we are continuing. Remember I said our questions are scaffolding. Now we move on to the single questions, for example, that require you to explain, to discuss, to distinguish, to differentiate between, to explain with the aid of a graph, or to tabulate them. Right, these are normally our 8-mark questions, and you find them in question 2.4, 3.4, and 4.4. These questions are important because if, as a candidate, you get these questions right, your chances of passing that particular exam are right. So make sure you attempt these questions no matter what. Leaving a blank space doesn't earn you any marks, or it doesn't earn you any points. Attempt this question, right? Learners should explain or discuss in full sentences, right? If a question in 2.4 requires you to show differences, I would suggest that you guys draw a table and show the visible differences between the two items that you are required to show differences in. Right, if it's a diagram that is required, please draw a fully labeled diagram. Make sure all the X's are fully labeled appropriately. Listing or naming is not encouraged for this type of questions. The other type of questions you can expect here, it's your differentiate question. For example, differentiate between consumer price index and producer or production price index. Right, when you are asked to differentiate, you need to draw a table. It makes it easy for you to follow your thought process there. For example, consumer price index, this one pertains to the cost of living, and then producer price index pertains to the cost of production there. You earn marks, you earn 2 points there. And then the basket typically consists of consumer goods and services. And then this one, the basket consists of goods only. And then capital goods and intermediate goods are excluded from consumer price index, and producer price index includes capital and intermediate goods there. For consumer price index, prices include VAT, and then for producer price index, prices exclude VAT, right? Interest rates are taken into account for this one, and then interest rates are excluded there. Then prices of imported goods are not shown explicitly there. Prices of imported goods are shown explicitly there. Again, because the mark allocation is 8 marks, you need to at least earn 4 marks per point there. So 4 marks for producer price index, and then 4 marks for consumer price index. At least 2 points, 2 points each. Remember, if you run out of points here, give examples. Those were our 8-mark question for question 4.4, 2.4, and 3.4. The last segment, these are single questions on how, why, etc., etc. These are higher order cognitive level questions. We are looking at our 2.5, 3.5, and 4.5. You need, as a responder or as a learner or a candidate, to give effect to the contextual demands of the question. So make sure you answer the question as it requires there. Right, examples of these are: how is X related to Y? What is the impact of B on C? What are the consequences of, etc., etc.? How effective are? Propose a solution to this particular problem. So, and also evaluate type of questions. When you get these type of questions, please, you need to show and you need to demonstrate to the marker or the examiner that you know the content and you are able to apply what is needed to be able to meet the demands of these particular questions. Right, boys and girls, let's switch over to Luni to take us to the ad break.
Thank you so much, Tando. Guys, we are going to take a quick break, but don't go anywhere. We'll see you straight after this. Welcome back from the break, guys. We are still busy with your exam guide. Don't forget to also enter that competition, and you could stand yourself a chance to win 2 gigs of data. Thank you so much, Tando, and over to you.
Thank you once again, Luni. Welcome back, boys and girls. I hope you are finding this session informative. Now we are moving on to our section C. We are looking at our essay type of questions, right? The action verbs that you can expect from our section C. We are looking at discuss in detail, examine in detail, compare and contrast in detail. This is what you can expect for this type of questions. Again, boys and girls, I need to also emphasize the point that in your exam guide, the one that you guys were given, I'm sure your teachers have given you guys exam guide. Anywhere in the exam guide where it says examine in detail, typically that is an essay question. So normally you will find about 6 essay questions or essay topics, essay questions per module. So all in all, you've got about 24 essay questions. I hope by now you have tackled them. You know which ones you are going to attempt in the exam. So I'll take it again. I said anywhere where it says examine in detail, that is typically an essay question. Tackle that. One of the 6 definitely is going to be there in the exam. Right, now let's continue. Right, when answering the main part of the essay, you should write headings, subheadings, and provide examples up to a maximum of 8 marks. Remember what I said in answering your essay, especially the main body, right? Out of the 26 marks that are attributable to your section, to your essay, the main part of the essay, 18 of those are the points and the arguments and the discussion of whatever the question is. The 8 marks has been dedicated to your headings and your examples. Please don't be shy in giving the e.g.s there in the exam. E.g. this, e.g. that. And also make sure your headings are identifiable. Underline them with a ruler so that the examiner or the marker is able to identify that this is a heading or a subheading. Right? Explanations and discussions should be written in a point and in a bullet form in full sentences. Please do not write like you're writing your essays on languages there. Use your bullet form. Right? Graphs and illustrations should have a heading and be labeled and plotted correctly. What am I saying here, boys and girls? I'm saying, for example, if you are asked to discuss the equilibrium positions, maybe in a perfect market, you'll have your economic profit graph, your normal profit graph, and your economic loss graph. Please give the appropriate heading. If you are drawing economic profit, you need to show that this is economic profit. And if you are tackling economic loss, again, there should be an appropriate heading that says economic loss, so that the marker may be able to identify what they are marking. Unfortunately, in the exam, if you just draw a graph without a proper heading of what you are drawing, you miss out on the marks there. Those are easy marks, boys and girls. I don't want you guys to lose out on those ones. So let's be alert in the exam. And then the additional part of the essay should be a higher cognitive level type of question. We are looking at our how can type of question, our why does type of question, our evaluate, our analyze, and our how successful type of question. Or you will be asked to propose, to suggest, etc., etc. Like I said earlier on to you, boys and girls, when you get this type of questions, there are always 2 sides to every argument. So you need to give on the narrative on the side of the argument and against the side of the argument. So you show arguments for and arguments against. You show the successes, you show the failures, and then you conclude there. Right, you should indicate the following when responding to your essay: your introduction, your main part, your additional part, and also your conclusion. So when you are writing your introduction, please write the word introduction there. You are not too old, you are not too educated to write introduction. Please write it, as it's going to guide the marker to be able to identify that you are discussing an introduction there. When you get to the main part, skip a line, then write main part, and then you write your main part there. Once you are done with your main part, skip another line, write additional part, and then you discuss your additional part, then you go to your conclusion again, write conclusion there. This makes the layout of your work easy to mark, and also your points become easily identifiable there. Right. Essay type questions are 2-folded, like I've already said. We've got the main part, which is 26 marks, and then we've got the additional part, which is 10 marks there, as outlined in the table on the next few slides. So this is the slide that shows us how our essay is asked. Like I said, if you are discussing your introduction, write introduction, and then you underline there. And then when you are doing your introduction, a good starting point would be to define a concept or a keyword that appears in the market there. Let's assume you are asked market failure, whether it's the consequences of market failure or the effects of market failure. A good starting point for that particular essay would be to define what market failure is. So you can go something like, market failure occurs when the forces of demand and supply fail to allocate resources efficiently, full stop. You don't need to expand much on that. You earn your full 2 marks just for defining the concept there. You also need to include other sentences to support the topic. Do not include in your introduction any part of the question. Do not repeat what the question is asking you. Do not repeat again part of the introduction in the main body. So you cannot now start talking about in an essay for market failure. Now you start talking about externalities, you start talking about missing information, as such information is going to be tackled in the main body. So avoid repeating things that are in the introduction in your main body. Right? Avoid saying in the introduction what you are going to discuss in the main body. So try and keep your introduction short and sweet there and straight to the point. Right? The second part of our essay is the main part. Right? This is the discussion in detail, the in-depth discussion, the examine in detail, the critically discuss. This is where the main part of your question for the essay is. You evaluate, you distinguish, you differentiate, you explain, assess, debate. This carries with it in the exam 26 marks. Right? Like I said earlier on, of these 26 marks, the 8 marks from the 26, this is our headings and examples. So the 8 marks, it's our headings and examples there. So always give headings, always give examples in your essay there, as if you don't, you will lose the 8 marks there. Then we move on. The third part of your essay is the additional part, where here you will be asked things like give own opinion, critically discuss, evaluate, critically evaluate, calculate, deduce, compare between, briefly debate, how, suggest how, distinguish between, etc., etc. This carries with it 10 marks, right? Of the 10 marks, you need to give at least 5 points here. At least 5 points. Remember, I said write in point form. This is a 5. Boys and girls, sorry about that. So it carries with it 5 points there. Minimum, that is the minimum that you need to have. Because normally we mark at least 2 marks per point. So to get the 10, make sure you give the 5 points there. The mistake that a lot of you boys and girls make is you skip this question or you completely forget the question in the exam. Make sure as you enter the exam, you are able to identify your question. This is the question for my main body, and this is the question for my additional part. Do not leave this question unanswered. From there, you get to your conclusion, right? You get to your conclusion, right? Conclusion is, like I said, a higher order conclusion, which should include a brief summary of what you discussed without repeating facts already mentioned. So please do not repeat what you've already discussed above. Any opinion or value judgment on the facts that you have already discussed. Any additional support information to strengthen your argument or your discussion above. A contradictory viewpoint with motivation if required. Or you can make any recommendations there. Your conclusion carries 2 marks there. Again, don't over-explain. It shouldn't be 10 lines or a long paragraph. At most 5 lines there should do the job there. So that is your essay, right? So remember, I said we have got our main body, we have got our introduction, we have got our additional part, and then finally we have our conclusion there, right? Let's look at an example, boys and girls, of a question that you can find in your paper 2 for the essay. It says, compare and contrast a perfect market and an oligopoly in detail under the following headings. Right, let me just change my ink there. Right, so compare and contrast a perfect market and an oligopoly, and in detail under the following headings. You should discuss under number of businesses, entry into and exit from the market, influence over the price, the nature of the product, demand curve, the profit in the long run, and then availability of information. What I need to say, boys and girls, typically if you find a question with subheadings that are given for you, your explanation needs to ensure that it covers all the subheadings that are given. For example, here in the question, you will find typically there will be a numbering or there will be a mark allocation next to each subheading. You might find for number of businesses, you are given 4. For entry and exit into the market, you are given another 4. For influence over price, 4 marks. So you would find normally each and every one of those subheadings carries a mark. So if you fail to discuss maybe the remaining 3, you lose out on the 12 marks there. So make sure that you explain and you are able to tackle the question under the given subtopics there. Right, your typical additional part would be how successful is the competition policy in promoting a more competitive economy. Remember I said this carries 10 marks there to give you a total for the essay, 40 marks. Right, when you are given this essay, I'll repeat once again, boys and girls, tackle the questions independently. Do your main body, do your main question, which carries the 26 marks, plus your introduction and your conclusion, and also tackle the additional part as a separate question, but within one question there. Right, now let's look at the introduction typically. Can you see that I have clearly indicated that this is an introduction? It's properly underlined there. What are we going to typically say as our introduction? A market structure refers to the main characteristics. So it refers to the main characteristics of a market in which individual businesses sell their products and includes their production cost there. So any other relevant introduction there, remember I said for an introduction you can include a definition, you can include a concept there, and you get your 2 full marks. Remember to write full sentences. Right, now let's go to the main body. You see it's written main body, I'm underlining there. So our first sub question is under number of businesses. For example, then you will tackle the perfect competition, right? What happens in terms of number of businesses in a perfect competition? There is many buyers and sellers in a perfect competition. And then let's look at in an oligopoly. Remember, we are comparing and contrasting between these two. So I've discussed what is happening in a perfect competition. I'm now discussing what is happening in an oligopoly. Oligopoly, only few suppliers manufacture the product or they exist when a small amount or a small number of large companies are able to influence the supply of a product or service into a market. So in oligopoly, we only have few suppliers manufacturing that particular product. Let's move on to the next. So typically, this is how you should tackle the question. If, for example, you wanted to look at entry and exit into the market, you will discuss typically to say there are no barriers to entry and exit in a perfect competition. And then now when you are discussing in an oligopoly, you will say entry and exit into the market is not so easy, like in the part of a perfect market. Look at the demand curve. In a perfect competition, a perfect competitor has got a horizontal demand curve, and then an oligopoly has got a kinked demand curve. So I've just done 2 or 3 for you guys as examples there. Now let's look at how we tackle our additional part, right? The additional part you need now to discuss or to evaluate the success of the competition policies in the country. Now, typically, this is how we would answer. So the competition policy is successful by making provision for institutions like the Competition Commission, the Competition Tribunal, and the Competition Appeals Court to investigate any unfair competition in the country there. You get your 2 marks there, right? And then you go to the next point, and then you will say these competition policies function as investigators and evaluators of restrictive business practices there. So they investigate and they evaluate any restrictive business practices. Then your next point is making recommendations about penalties for businesses found guilty of abuse of power there, right? So you'll be earning your 2 points for every point that you have expanded there. This is just an example, guys. There are many other points that you can expand on the success or the failure thereof. Remember I said It's an evaluate type of question, so you can show the successes and then you can go then down and discuss the failures, if ever you've got any that you can point out. For example, you can talk about any anti-competitive behavior that you might have noticed in the last 5 years. Remember to keep your response relevant. You cannot talk about things that happened 20 years ago or 10 years ago. Try and keep it relevant to what has been happening around you. Now we move on to the conclusion, right? This is typically a conclusion. I say it conclusion, higher order type of question. It says, unlike a perfect competition, an oligopolist uses non-price measure. I'll take it again, unlike perfect competition, an oligopolist uses non-price measures such as after-sales service to attract customers and to increase their market share. You would typically get 2 marks for that, right? So this is how you would get your full 40 marks for the essay, 2 marks for the introduction, your 26 for the main body, which includes your 8 marks for the headings and examples, and then your 10 marks for the additional part, and then your 2 marks for the conclusion there. Remember to show the layout of your essay appropriately. Right, boys and girls, this was basically my exam guide into paper 2. I encourage you guys to continue focusing, continue studying, revise as many past exam papers as you can, ask relevant questions with your teachers, to your peers, and to any platform that has been made available for you guys to access information. There is still time. You guys can still change whatever mark you got for your preparatory exams. That's it from me. Thank you so much. Over to you, Loli.
Thank you so much, Tando. Guys, that is the end of the show. Thank you for tuning in. And like Tando said, if you have any questions, still send those through. Go through past papers. Do as much preps as you can because you still have time. We're wishing you everything of the best for your final exams, guys, but we are here to assist you as best as we can. Congratulations to all of the competition winners who will be announced on Facebook after the show. And if you still want more revision, go to www.wozamatrix.co.za. From me, Luni, Nicolene, and Tando, thank you and goodbye.